it is my pleasure to introduce our next speakers who know for sure how to build a website with 1,000,000 articles. Please meet Bart Witteveen and Remco Mantel from Smartshore Ability.
All right, thank you very much, Anastasia. My name is Remco Mantel. You were all expecting maybe Bart Witteveen, but I will start off. First of all, I would like to explain a little bit about the project we did, the RD.nl project. And let's start. These are the topics we're going to talk about, the project a little bit. Bart will tell you about why we chose Strapi. He will tell you about the architecture and the challenges we had. And we will come up with some improvements we think Strapi can improve on. So let's start with the project. The RD project is about Reformatorisch Dagblad, which is one of the newspapers in the Netherlands. It's the biggest religious newspaper in the Netherlands. They have over 25 journalists, editors, you may say, that are using the system. And basically they're using Strapi as a CMS. We start off with a connection with Prestige. Prestige is their system in which they write all the content for the regular physical newspaper, the newspaper itself. Those articles will be imported by us into Strapi. And there's also a connection with AMP, which is a general Dutch press agency. And that enables all the editors to write stories or to adapt the stories a little bit, because you can imagine that news for a website is a bit different than news for a newspaper. Fun facts. At this moment, we have over 900,000 plus articles, almost 1,000,000. We have over 840,000 assets. The website has about 50 to 70,000 visitors a day. And every day there's about 150 plus of news articles a day. Why Strapi? That's something I will hand over to Bart. So Bart, take it over.
All right, thank you very much. So we were discussing with RD like what type of requirements they had, obviously, for this project. So one of the things that they wanted, I'll just skip over to the next. They wanted something that was a bit more fast, because their old CMS was sometimes a bit slow. And also, I think it's a great addition that that Strapi is fully web-based versus some desktop application. The reasons why we chose Strapi as an option is because it's relatively light, much lighter than their big desktop application in which they used to edit the articles. Also, I think the lock-in is not too much, because the database that you end up with is also relatively simple and only keeps the data that you really want to store. So if at some point, which we hope not, of course, they want to move away from Strapi again, you have you have a simple database that you could migrate somewhere else quite easily, because it's just the data that you have. There's no overhead like some other CMSs have. Except, of course, for some basic tables for users and permissions and that kind of stuff, but not too much, really. Also, it's very scalable. The site that we host for them is, like Remco said, expecting a lot of visitors each day. So we need to be able to scale the website if we need to. Strapi is pretty much stateless, so we can deploy new instances of the same application horizontally, which makes it really powerful to scale if they expect more visitors in certain certain times a day, or even like with, I don't know, any particular news that may come up that causes them to expect a lot of users. We could actually scale up if they have to. Big requirement was for the CMS to be headless, because we wanted to have a more fancy front end, I would say, than most server-side rendered pages. So we're using Vue in the front end, which we'll talk about later. And Strapi allows you to basically pick whatever front end you want, because it's just giving you the data and that's it. And then the last one, already in the earlier conversations with the customer, we realized that they would be asking for quite some customizations. And Strapi is in that way quite easy to extend, simply because it's based on Koa, which is like it's a bit less well known than Express, I would say, but it's a big framework in Node.js world. So it's easy to extend, write middlewares. Strapi plugins offer the same flexibility if you need it to be a bit different than a middleware. So lots of options to customize if you want to. So yeah, that's why we chose in the end to go for Strapi in this solution. Let me move over. I'll try and tell you a bit more about the architecture of the whole thing. So Strapi is, as we'll probably come up to multiple times in this presentation, is really the core of everything at the moment. So we have Strapi in the middle. Then on the bottom left and bottom, you see MySQL and S3, which is basically the way that we store the data persistently. So the database contains the articles for the newspaper, all the tags, categories, all that kind of data that they really edit in their CMS. And then there is the storage of images, pictures, videos, audio, whatever they want to put into the CMS attached to articles. For example, we store it externally in S3. On the left, you will see the daily newspaper system. So they publish every day a new paper. Yeah, of course, except for Sunday, I believe. But so every now and then, depending on the time of day, of course, there's some or a lot of articles coming in, and we have to process them to be published on the website quite quickly. So it's a script that is checking in for new changes coming from their daily paper and then pushing the changes into Strapi through the API that is sort of delivered by default in Strapi. So that's the way that most of the content will be coming in. And then next to that, of course, the editors have their own freedom to edit articles as they wish. On the right, you'll see the search API. It's sort of a separate application that we built custom, mostly because it's a bit bigger than the plugins and the middlewares that we had to build. So we figured it would make more sense as a separate thing in the architecture. Strapi basically pushes article changes in there so that we have a fully working search index for the front end to search on, which will eventually, of course, search in all the almost million articles that they have. And then if people click on a search result in the front end, they will be sent to a page that actually gets all the article data from Strapi again. So it's an index that helps combine stuff together. Then the front end is Vue, Nux to be really precise. We render pages on the server on the first render, and then it's basically a client-only application after that. And then the last part, of course, on the bottom right is this Elasticsearch itself, where we actually store the index. So that's pretty much it, I think. Most of the stuff, of course, that we really did, I think we'll discuss it a bit more later, is actually inside Strapi. So in the architecture, you won't see it as separate parts, but that's something we'll get back to later. Then the challenges we had in this project, and I think Remco is going to tell you about the first one, which is the internal search of Strapi.
Thanks a lot, Bart. When we were halfway in the project, we wanted to import a lot of data. Therefore, I think we imported about 200,000 articles. And one of the first things that the editors came up with was that the internal search within Strapi was not that good. Standardly in Strapi, you can only search on the title of an article, and that's not enough. When you have over 100,000 in this case when testing, but especially on the production environment by now, when you have almost a million articles, it's difficult to search only on the title. So therefore, they needed to have more advanced search capabilities. They wanted to be able to search on author, the whole content of an article, title, date, and a couple of other stuff. So we decided, as Bart said, to build something ourselves with Elasticsearch. So we implemented two search pages, basically the website search, as you can see here. And you can search on categories, you can search on relevance, and you can also search on the period. And we also made an internal search, especially for the the editors. And as you can see here, it's a bit more. You can also search on category and relevance as on the website itself, but you can also search on a type of article or the length of an article, and you can also search on a tag. This is a specific page within Strapi, and they can simply copy the title of the article, which makes it way more easier to search in the end on an exact title within Strapi. And Bart, over to you again. He's going to talk about the performance.
Yeah, so I think the first time when we talked to people from Strapi about the fact that we use this for such a big website, they were quite surprised, which I think makes sense if you use Strapi out of the box. But therefore we really had to make some adjustments in the way that we handle the data that is going through Strapi to actually make it work. So yeah, almost 1 million articles. I think if you index your database well, that will actually work pretty much fine. But Strapi is also, because you have all the flexibility in your data model, like relationships, the components, the dynamic zones, for example, to name a few. Basically, in the layer of under what you use, of course, they eventually just populate stuff from the database. So they do multiple queries to actually get the data together that you ask for, which is the most resource consuming part of the getting the data to the client. So we tried to minimize this population as much as we could. And that was, it's quite a challenge, I think, to get that right. And it's also one of the improvements that we will get back to later that we would really like to see in Strapi. But I think we got it working to a point where we at least got to minimize the amount of data that we populate to actually make it a bit quicker. But really, most of the performance improvement comes from, I think, trying to offload the database. And we did that by using Redis, which in our case, in our situation with the website, I think of course, it's a news website. So the content needs to be new. Otherwise, people wouldn't read it. But it's not stuff that changes that much. So we have articles. They publish an article, and if they have a change in an article, it's not a big deal if it would change on the website like 1 minute later than when it's published in some cases. So we use a lot of caching on the website. We basically just stored some of the JSON in Redis, and Strapi being built on top of Koa is making that quite easy because you can just use a middleware to sort of bypass all the calls that Strapi is going to make if you still have a cache available. So yeah, by that we improved the performance a lot, and also I think we managed to get the whole site running on a relatively small database, I would say, for the number of users and data that we have inside. Simply by reusing data that was already taken before and caching it properly. Another challenge, which is not necessarily a challenge in how it's complex, because I think Strapi made implementing this stuff quite easy. But it was a challenge for us to make it work in big amounts, because there's a lot of stuff that we need to connect to. One of the challenges that sort of came in last, but it's listed first, is that alongside the website that we built, there's another party who is now making their app. So they are consuming the data from same place as our website, which is of course a really big advantage of using a headless CMS. But it will also make, we consume the data a bit different. So we had to make some changes for that, and also make some separate endpoints, for example, for the application, for the mobile application. So this is all stuff that you can do quite simply in Strapi, just creating a new endpoint using the same data that you already have. So with minor changes, I think in general, we managed to sort of welcome the other party to build an app on the same platform. So we discussed already before the publishing of a new article. So every time when their paper publishing system is publishing a new article, we have to get it into Strapi as well, which is a script that uses the Strapi API. Then on each change in articles or newly created articles, we have to write changes to the index, because if someone If someone adjusts an article, you want it to be found by the new content, of course, not by whatever was already in there. So we have to keep the index up to date at any time. They are taking weather data from an external party that we have written into a plugin that gets the right data from the weather info. Then we have an additional endpoint searching in an external archive. So besides the articles that they have in our system, there is another archive that contains even more articles than what we have. And every time when someone searches, they will also get alongside whatever we found on our website, we have this many results in the external archive. So it's like an external link that searches also. Also, that is built into a plugin in Strapi. Then, of course, as a new paper, they also have the e-paper, which people can read on another page on the website. And also that is a plugin that gets the e-paper data to show on the website through an endpoint. So essentially, Strapi became a real big hub for all data that is being taken from different places, pulling from whatever we needed, and using plugins and middlewares. I think we got that done quite easily in Strapi. Of course, the work itself is in writing the plugins, but connecting it to Strapi is really quite easy to set up. Some improvements. We have, of course, run into some stuff that we would like to see different or that we think can be done better. And I think it was also interesting to mention that in this presentation. The first one I discussed a little bit earlier. It's about the population. So I think it's really nice that Strapi offered the components and the dynamic zones, which for a bit less technical users makes it really easy to build your data model and get basically whatever you want. But it also means that you have to get data from a lot of tables eventually. And that is something we found really, growing in terms of response time, for example. So if you have a lot of components, a lot of dynamic zones, you can slowly see the response time and the performance going up. So performance going down, response time going up. So that is something I think is could use some work in the way Strapi is set up. And the good thing is that they already have this on the roadmap. So it's actually on planned section already. So I guess it's approved as a feature that they would really like to improve the CMS in. So that's nice to see that this kind of stuff is being improved as well, because it's not something that you would see as a end user with not too much content, because it will be working just fine. But if you use it for bigger projects and you want to use it for bigger projects, maybe, then it's really nice if they make a solid step in improving this, I think. And then the last one, TypeScript. I think that TypeScript, especially in how big Strapi code base can get when you write quite some plugins in middlewares and making it more complex, because you need the functionality, it would be really powerful to have TypeScript support in the project. The services that Strapi offers to query data in anywhere in your application really would be even more powerful if you get the opportunity to use the type checking there, because you can just see what data is coming in, whether you have certain properties or you don't have certain properties. So if they could manage to get that working, which I think is not really something you have done tomorrow, because it's going to be a lot of work, because Strapi, of course, has developed quite a lot in the last time. So I think it's a lot of work, but it would be really powerful to have it in Strapi. I think they also have it as an option, but this one, whereas the other improvement in population is already planned, I think this one is under consideration. So it's not been decided yet, but we would really, really like to see this, but also understand that it's a lot of work and it won't be done tomorrow. So I think that's it for our presentation. I think you have the opportunity to ask questions on the channel if you want to. and would really like to thank you also, Remco here, for the for being interested in our presentation, and good to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you, Bart and Remco, for sharing this story. That is so impressive. And by the way, great tips on how we could improve Strapi. If you want to check out what features we're going to implement in Strapi in the future, you can go to our public roadmap that's accessible to everyone, and it was actually mentioned in the presentation.